It's football time on this episode of the Locked On Aggies podcast.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Aggies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. I am your host, Joey Ikes, and it is my great pleasure to welcome a friend of mine who works with me at aggieswire.usatoday.com covering the Aggies, and that is my good friend Cameron Ohnysty. Cameron, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, good to be here, man. Glad to talk about pretty much the impending season, camp starting. It's going to be fun, man.
Absolutely. So it is Wednesday, August the 3rd, and we are excited because football practice starts in earnest for Texas A&M today. So we're going to take a little bit of a journey through a quick camp preview. And I know for me, the whole season, the whole camp, it all starts with the quarterback position, right? So Talk to me a little bit about where you stand on the quarterback situation, who your favorite is to come out of camp, who you think might come out of camp, all those sorts of things as the starting quarterback in the battle between Max Johnson, Haynes King, and maybe a little bit of Connor Wigman thrown in there too.
So it's going to be interesting to say the least. And I think that's going to be the most widely discussed anything Texas A&M related. I'm talking just right out of the gate starting tomorrow. I mean, it's been happening, but it's going to start ramping up tomorrow throughout the weekend. And a lot of it is predicated on Max Johnson and Haynes King. And like you said, Connor Wigman's in the mix. And that's the thing, is Connor Wigman's very young. And so when you're dealing with a five-star freshman talent like that in practice he's going to make the throws, he's going to have, show why he was rated the way he was. But in areas like pressures and pocket presence and some of the things that are going to take a couple of years to get along with and learn, that's why a lot of it is going to be geared towards watching Max and Haynes kind of fight it out and see if Haynes, coming back from that injury plagued season last year, in the second season, didn't really get a chance to show what he can do at all. And he kind of it's pretty unfair in a way. I always kind of think of that he's coming in against someone like Max Johnson, transferred from LSU, has about a season and a half under his belt. I think he threw for 27 touchdowns last year. He has a great resume, and he played for an LSU team last year that on the O-line was not very good, and he was tough as nails, and he showed that against A&M at the in the November game. And I mean, all of us had to watch him kind of just strike it down the field and taking I don't know how many sacks from Michael Clemens in that game, but he shows toughness, he shows ability, and that's the thing. I personally right now, we'll be writing about this, we'll be talking about this for a while until pretty much the end of August, in my opinion. But it's really going to be looking at what does Max do differently than Haynes, what does Haynes do differently than Max, and which player gives Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies the best chance to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked about this a little bit here and a little bit on Aggies Wire, is that it's going to come down probably to what Jimbo's looking for. He's going to get two different flavors of quarterback, I think, whenever he's dealing with Haynes and with Max. And, Max is, like you said, the veteran guy with all the experience. And what we saw from Haynes last year was the high highs and the mistakes that come with a young quarterback playing. And so what we will find out is either A, Haynes was able to learn from that experience and will take that away and be a better decision maker and things like that from having the opportunity to play a little bit and then back off and watch again. And then, he was the guy getting a lot of the reps and getting ready to go into the bowl game before that situation took place. So he was able to get some more work in the offseason, get work in the spring. So we'll see how much he was able to take away from that experience that he had last year and bring to 2022, because it's the question that answers whether A&M will fulfill their expectations or whether they will fall short, is whether they can get consistent high-level quarterback play. So we know about the quarterback battle. What other position battles are there from your perspective that are going to take place? It'll be interesting to watch play out over the course of camp.
Yeah. So really, I'm looking at the D line, and I'm looking at who is going to replace that pass rush, because we all know the Marvin Leal is gone, Tyree Johnson is gone, Michael Clemens is gone, which
Yep.
I'm still a little sad about that. It was kind of one of those things where I thought, oh man, if we had one more year, Michael, we're looking at 15 sacks. We're looking at Von Miller type of.
Huge
I don't
year,
know, but it's just one of those things where, guys like Donnell Harris, who a lot of people have maybe not forgotten about him, but they just haven't seen a lot of him. He's slated to go to outside linebackers, what I've heard through the grapevine, and that's kind of the way that I think DJ Durkin could use him in the pass rush. And that's a guy who was, I think, one of the number one players in Florida coming out of, I believe, the 2020 class. And just with injuries last year and just not being able to kind of crack the rotation with those senior guys, that's a position I'm looking at. Defensive end and edge rusher, Fadil Diggs at edge, and then Tamishi Adelie.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard great things. I think we saw a little bit from the spring game. This is a destined next great Aggie pass rusher, in my opinion, playing at the defensive end spot. A proven run stopper in high school, has shown that. And then the three tech defensive tackle position between, I think Shemar Turner is going to take a lot of that. Taught a lot of those reps, and I think he's going to be one of the leaders. But really, the position battle that and I think you're probably with me on that, is at nose tackle with McKinley Jackson and Walter Nolen, who Walter Nolen's the number one player in the class. I've heard that this is a kid who deserves a lot of snaps right out of the gate. He's an instant impact type of player. McKinley Jackson is a proven guy. Now, can you move Nolen around? Maybe. But I think his position is at nose tackle. And I think that's going to be interesting, because I think Jackson has an NFL career. He'd like to play as much as possible. But you've got to play all these guys on the defensive line. And I could throw in even Shemar Stewart into there, who's a freakish athlete, who is somebody like we were just talking about with quarterbacks. And I think you mentioned that in the last pod about, guys need to play, because especially these really talented guys, because you don't want the fear to come in of them potentially leaving the next season. So there's just so many players on that D line that I think starters matter, yes, but there's a lot of players who are going to take a lot of snaps and play those key backup roles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the defensive line is going to be extremely interesting to watch. And a big part of that is, like you said, just the pure volume of players that there are in that group, and the capabilities that they each bring to the table, the massive influx of talent that came in, and they were lucky in that most of them were able to come in the spring and get through some spring ball. And those guys, Walker Nolen, Shemar Stewart, those guys came in, and those guys are ready to play and contribute at the SEC level right away. These aren't the guys who come in and, they'll get, a couple of snaps here and there. Those guys are ready to be impact players in conference play right away. And so that influx of talent, combined with what A&M has consistently had on the defensive side of the ball for a while now, is going to be very interesting to watch. Before we get into expectations and things like that for the season, it's time to talk about Bet Online. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and yes, even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information for live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, Cameron. Let's talk about the 2022 season, and let's talk about what your expectations are. It's the big question. It goes back to, what we talked about in the first segment with the quarterback position. It's going to drive so much of this. What are your expectations for the season for the Aggies?
Okay. So, I think there's two sets of expectations. There's the diehard Aggie fan in me and you that going to every season, and we're like, oh man, undefeated, 12 wins, college football playoff. Finally, Jimbo's got this team. And look, I'm going to be honest. Like, there's the writer in me, and we have to be factual. We have to go by what we believe. Not. We have to take our fandom out of it a lot of the time, which is fine. But look, I'm going to merge the two and say I am super confident in this group. I'm super confident in the depth at every position group and even quarterback, because I'll start with quarterback in that way with the expectation question. We got to go back to last year when there were basically 3 guys on the roster, 2 of them inexperienced, and then a walk-on was the 3rd string quarterback. And we came into that season knowing everything else on that squad was ready to compete. And they were built in every area possible. And, during some of those games, and especially the ones in October, minus obviously the miraculous Alabama win, quarterback play hindered the team, hindered the outcome. And so when I look at that group specifically from a depth perspective, that's what makes me feel good. And I would say right now, I've looked at the schedule 100 times. I've analyzed it in my head. We'll be analyzing it at Aggies Wire a lot. So get prepared for that. But look, I'm looking at 10 to 11 wins. Low bar would be 9, and even 9 wins with this schedule, in my personal opinion, is successful. I think that's a successful season. Look, it's a gauntlet in the SEC every year, and it's kind of how it rolls this year. And I think a lot of people may be looking at 2023 as the season that Texas A&M is really going to push forward and finally make the Final Four. But look, anything can happen this year, and everybody should be very confident to start the season and just be realistic, but be very confident, because this group is going to roll out a lot of special players, and you're going to get a lot of special performances from each position group.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we think back, to the good days of 2012, right? When A&M joins the SEC, right? And Johnny Manziel rolls into campus, and it very quickly, all the expectations and hey, maybe it's going to take a little time to see any success in the SEC. Maybe we need to, hold back our expectations, be ready for the fact that this is a gauntlet. This competition is the best conference in college football. And Johnny Manziel rolls in and blows all that out the window. Yeah. And there's always the possibility, especially when you have so much unknown at the quarterback position, with 2 of the 3 guys have very little to no college football experience. There's always that end of the range of possibilities, just like there is the range of possibilities that luckily for A&M, they've shrunk that low end a little bit, because worst case scenario is probably that you wind up at some point, whether he starts the season or not, you wind up with Max Johnson as your quarterback game in and game out. Sure. And we know what that floor looks like, and we know that's pretty good. That's competitive in the SEC, and with the rest of this roster, they should be able to compete and win 8 or 9 games, even if that's the floor. But the ceiling side of the expectation for the year, that range of expectations, we don't really know what that end is. I mean, we do, because there's only so far it can go, right? It's the college football playoff, yes. holding trophies at the end of the year. We know that that's out there. How likely that is remains to be seen. But it's important for A&M fans to remember that they have a pretty solid floor at the quarterback position, and they have what could be massive upside. And that's going to really drive whether this team is an 8 or 9 win team, or an 11 or 10, 11, 12 win team that contends for a national championship. And I think you're right. Depending on how the quarterback play works out, it could very easily be a 9-4 type season after the bowl game, and be a successful season, and roll into 2023 with the higher expectations of, this 2022 class now has a year under their belt. This 2023 class that we'll talk about here in a little bit is in and now a part of the team, and now is when we're really ready to be a contender in the SEC and at the college football playoff level. Yeah, so now we've sort of covered what we think success looks like for 2022, which is awesome. So outside of the defensive lineman that we talked about a little bit earlier in the position battle conversation, are there specific players or developments that you're looking forward to? Outside of the quarterback, of course, that you're looking forward to watching take place over 2022, and what that might tell us about the future of A&M football as well as the current state.
Yeah. So I think the kind of, I would guess the sexy position group that a lot of fans are looking at is the wide receivers, and I think that's been a position when I was doing a lot of the position groups early, and I was kind of keying in on the offense. The wide receiver group is stacked, and you can kind of, I guess people would categorize that by experience or just skill set or kind of a combination of both. But when you finally have, I would say, two players on your roster in freshmen, Evan Stewart and Chris Marshall, who are legit deep threats. And again, that, you can connect the quarterback to that, who can throw best deep, who's that pure deep thrower. But either way, in space, deep, it doesn't matter. These are freakish athletes who can play. I believe really Evan Stewart can play the X, he can play the Z, hell, he can play slot, and Chris Marshall can play really the X of the Z, and he can play them very well. And he's just not a straight line burner. He's a guy who in the open field can make some noise. And these are two players that I believe are going to play a lot of snaps to start the season. And they're going to be two guys that end up developing very, very well once we get into the October slate. Now, the other player that I'm very, very high on in the linebacking corps is Edgerton Cooper. And so this is Cooper's time to finally shine and be the go-to guy paired with Andre White Jr. at the linebacker position. And again, this in the 4-2-5 defense, you've only got two linebackers in the middle, and you've got a lot of help, and you've got guys like Antonio Johnson, who I don't think we even need to mention how good Antonio Johnson is, because I mean he's the pinnacle of Texas A&M right now in terms of just everything they represent. But when you have those two guys, and Edgerton Cooper is going to have to clean up a lot on either side. He's going to have to use that ranginess and sideline to sideline ability. That's somebody who I'll be looking at a lot, and I think he's going to be one of the more important defenders in terms of how that defense covers the intermediate portion of the field week to week.
Absolutely. So much of the game of football, at this point, especially at the college level, is about manipulating those second level defenders, those linebackers and down safeties, and the ability for those guys, for A&M, for DJ Durkin's scheme to be able to sort out all that stuff, deal with the motion, deal with the formations and stuff that they'll see, will say a lot about what this A&M defense is able to accomplish. And I think you've got it nailed on the wide receivers also. There's so much excitement around this group because for the first time in quite a while, like you said, they have guys that can test the defense down the field. They've had guys before, that can make plays underneath, make a guy or two miss, and maybe create a big play that way. But that's been a huge struggle for A&M for years, is how do you create plays down the field? How do you make big explosive gains in the passing game with your wide receivers without having to create it using scheme with screens and things like that? And that's what these two young freshmen bring, and that's a really exciting idea for A&M fans. All right, now let's talk a little bit about recruiting. Recruiting never stops. We just came off of the pool party weekend. We had a conversation with John Garcia from Sports Illustrated earlier this week. So tell me about the 2023 class. Which commitment so far are you most excited about in terms of what they can bring to College Station?
So, I mean, I think the recruit would probably both name is Anthony Hill. I mean, this is a guy who could be, again, that generational player. I kind of hate that term, but there are so few and far between, but I believe he's one of them. I've watched that kid's tape over and over, and honestly, we're both Dallas Cowboy diehards. Micah Parsons comes to mind. I'm sorry, I hate doing that, but Micah Parsons definitely comes to mind watching him. He's a downhill, explosive individual. I mean, this is somebody who you need blitz, you need a blitz package to set up, you need pressures. You send Anthony Hill down the middle, no guard can guard him. I think I saw him squatting 455 the other day. I mean, this is a strong individual, it's a fast individual, and this is a guy who, when he gets to College Station, is going to learn under DJ Durkin, and DJ Durkin is going to use him like they used Deion Sanders back then in the NFL. I mean, this is a kid who has potential. I mean, the potential is the highest I've seen in a defensive player in a long time. And that, I mean, I was giddy. I was giddy like a little boy when they got him. I mean, it was exciting. And this is a player who can really change the program defensively. And so, I mean, he's my favorite, definitely. But I think everybody they've gotten in this class so far are players that fit A&M's scheme. They fit what they want to do. They're versatile players. And so, but yeah, I would definitely say Anthony Hill, by far my favorite. Probably my favorite beyond anybody compared to anybody else they get in this class. And that's no offense. This class is going to be great at the end.
But he's one of the top couple of defensive prospects in the entire class of 2023. Like, and you know, there's always the little bit of added juice whenever it's a head to head with Texas, and down to the final two, and there's a lot of confidence coming from Austin about where they stand, and then for him to drop that commitment on the pool party weekend before the event even starts, like, it just shows you, like, that none of this timing is on accident. None of this stuff is coincidence. Like, he dropped it right then on purpose so that he could go into the pool party and be a part of the recruiting process for the guys who could be his teammates and his classmates. Another guy that committed this weekend is probably my answer. It's a little different than Anthony Hill. Anthony Hill's the obvious one, like you said.
Yeah, true.
Dalton Brooks is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
From Shiner, Texas, small little town. Like, this is legacy. This is old school Texas A&M recruiting, right? Is to, like, go into small town Texas and pull, like, a 4-star player who in this tiny little town is going to do everything for his team. I think he had 1,320 total yards and 14 touchdowns on offense, and then like 55 tackles, a sack, and 2 interceptions or something like that as a junior for his football team. And so Dalton Brooks is really interesting to me. He's officially listed as an athlete by most of the recruiting services. A&M's going to play him at safety, I believe, and he'll be phenomenal there on the back end for A&M. But he's just, it's just that old school, like, that's the exact kind of recruit that A&M should dominate that recruiting process. Just for, just like, it just feels right for A&M to take advantage of that situation and bring one of those guys to College Station and give him a name, especially now with the national brand that A&M carries. It's pretty awesome to see that that kid get the opportunity to now have a national name made for himself and play on, he's going to play on CBS and ESPN, and it's going to be great. So, and here comes the big question, right? Is we've seen 3 really, really, just the only word you can use to describe them is elite prospects in the 2023 class roll through College Station somewhat surprisingly over the course of the last, month and a half. And that's, Zachariah Branch showed up on his only official visit that he has taken to anywhere besides USC earlier in the summer. And then Malachi Nelson, his quarterback buddy, who's also committed to USC, decides to show up. And Tony Mitchell, the defensive back from Alabama, who is committed to Alabama, decides to skip Alabama's big recruiting event and show up in College Station as well. So tell me, Cameron, do you think A&M flips 1 or 2 or all 3 of these guys?
Okay, my heart says 3. My heart says just all 3 by December. But honestly, Zachariah Branch, he's fascinating because you just don't see that a lot, and I think his answer was kind of fun. I kind of loved his answer. He's like, I just want to check it out, just check it out. Just check out College Station, what they have to offer, and that's probably a semi-honest answer. That's great. I mean, like, I get the recruiting trips. I know I had friends in high school been on them, and they said, oh, these are fun, it's just a fun weekend to check out what they have to offer. I'm like, that's great. But that he's one of the recruits that I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be very easy. His brother, I believe his name's Zion Branch, is a safety. I think he plays for USC.
Yeah.
So they got the connection there. So that worries me a little bit, but I'm very confident. The Malachi Nelson was fascinating. That dropped. I think it was a Thursday night. I guarantee I messaged you and was like, Malachi Nelson's coming to A&M. I was like. It's like I'm going to work the next day. I'm like this close to going to bed. I'm like, dude, what? Like, why'd you drop this now? I should have dropped in the morning. But it's very interesting. I think you guys talked about on the pod with John Garcia about just the whole situation going on with USC right now and Caleb Williams and really that being the Oklahoma connection was the reason that Caleb went to USC to play for Lincoln Riley. And Nelson was committed there before that even happened, obviously. So that there's a wrench thrown into that, and it's going to be very interesting. And I don't know if we're going to get a lot to come out of how great the weekend was for him. I'm sure we'll get some some crumbs in that area of it was a great visit, but we really won't know. I think until December with him. I think it's going to take a while till we hear anything. It's going to come down to signing day, but hey. Jimbo Fisher magic. I still believe in it, especially with recruiting. So anything could happen, but and then I think Tony Mitchell, I saw him on Twitter, basically do the thing that a lot of those recruits say is that I'm locked in, don't worry. Yeah, well, we'll see. Because you don't do what you did if you're completely locked in my humble opinion. I love that kid. I'd love to have him. But we'll just have to see. But really, I give Nelson the best chance right now because, I'm being optimistic as heck. But at the same time, with the situation with USC and everything else and the quarterback situation there, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a marathon situation with these three guys specifically. Because, Tony Mitchell's an Alabama kid who's committed to Alabama. Malachi Nelson's a Southern California kid committed to Southern Cal. Like, these guys are not flipping in August or September to then have to spend their entire senior year of high school, what they have left of it, because they're probably most of these guys are probably graduating early, trying to get to campus in the spring. These guys are not flipping now to have to answer these questions for the next 4 months and deal with their entire senior football season. Even if they've already made up their mind that they're going to flip, or even if they're open to the idea and this just continued recruiting efforts and things like that. And John Garcia called it elite quality recruiting is what A&M does at this point. And the system that they have in place to do it is at the highest levels in the country. You don't get the results that they've gotten without that. And so if they're able to, just continue the drip over on these guys for the next few months, when the middle of December rolls around, there's a much greater than 0% chance that one or more of these guys winds up sending a fax to College Station and not to Los Angeles or to Tuscaloosa. So, Cameron, thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to make this a regular thing. We're going to do Wire Wednesdays for a while. We're going to carry it through the college football season. It's going to be great. You can find me on Twitter at Joey Ikes. Cameron, let us know where we can find you on social, all that sort of stuff.
You can find me at Cameron Ohnysty, CAMERON, no space, OHNYSTY.
Awesome.
Then
so you can
read writings at Aggies Wire. Same with Joey.
Absolutely. You can find both of us at aggieswire.usatoday.com. Follow the show at Locked On Aggies. Subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice. Give us a 5-star review. And then make sure you check out YouTube, Locked On Aggies on the YouTube channel as well. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the little notification bell so you know whenever we post a new podcast. And make sure now that you've made Locked On Aggies your first listen of the day, get more on the SEC by making Locked On SEC your second listen. Every day, host Chris Gordy and the local experts of Locked On take you across the SEC in 30 minutes or less. Make Locked On SEC your second listen. That's Locked On SEC.